Hi, Vincent English here from Longford International College. It's a great pleasure to be introduced in an exciting podcast from an old friend of mine, Mick Clegg, who started his life, funny enough, as an electrical engineer in a power station. And that journey, his career, brought him to Manchester United, where he spent 10 long, successful years in the 2000s to oversee some of the greatest football talent ever to pass through the club, and its most successful ever time. So this is part one. Stay tuned for an exciting insight into what power can do to make you the very best you can be. See you later. When you're ready, I'm joking. So, hi Mick, nice to meet you in your gym, in your homestead, your second home. I've been here many times before, and every time I come back, it's always a very interesting visit.
Is it?
And it's nice to see continuous innovation, you know. But I'm always, although I know the story, but I think those who are listening might be interested in how all this started for you, and way back from the very beginning. You know, you've had an interest in fitness, and maybe tell us perhaps how you started in the strength and conditioning, or the fitness. I say fitness, not strength and conditioning? I do apologise.
Definitely not strength. It's more power development through the use of the brain is what I've really been looking at over the years.
Okay, so how did that come about then? So what brought this interest in, first of all, fitness and power? Because I know that power has been a great part of the tradition of the Cleggs, and it has got them to the pinnacle of many sports, you know, soccer and weightlifting and that kind of area. But what was the first trigger that brought about this interest in power itself?
Well, I have to take you back quite a bit of distance to give you an outline of what happened. I used to live in a house overlooking a power station. My dad worked in that power station, and eventually I worked in the power station. So I was involved in power from a very, very young age, knowing and understanding how it's made and what's its usage. Now, we're talking electrical power here, of course, and I worked in the power industry until I was 29, okay? But there was a time when I was 15 when I met a girl, and then we fell in love at 16 and we got engaged at 17. We got married and bought an house at 18, and then I had my first son at 19. That set the stage for everything to do with power, really. I was a guitarist in a band. I used to do Yorkshire circuit and everything. We had some photographs done. And when I looked at the photographs, I realised that my arms were actually smaller than my guitar strings. So I decided to go to a local gym and started training. And during the time that I was training, obviously I was getting stronger and looked a little bit better. But because I was used to being on the stage, I used to enjoy chatting to people, and people asked me questions. And I very quickly learned quite a lot about what I really got interested in. It's the development of power, mentally and physically, because of the things that I've known from the past. And the guy who owned the gym where I was working clocked me one day and he said, "Come here, Mick, I want to have a chat with you." Now, he was called Big Stanny. Big Stanny, his arms were bigger than my head. He was a massive guy. And he said, "I want you to tell me something." He said, "Why is it I'm the coach with all my muscles and you're a skinny little wimp and everybody comes to you for advice?" I said, listen, it's only people asking me. I've not tried to take over or anything like that. I was going to imagine skinny little wimp, this huge guy. I'm a little bit on the back foot, you know what I mean? And I said, it's just that, you know, I'm used to chatting to people and, you know, I do a bit of guitar work and stuff like that on stage. So I'm a bit of a showman, if you like. So they might be picking up on that. He said, "Well, I love it." So I said, "What?" He said, I want you to come and work for me. Now, I'd started training when I was 20. And by the time I was 21, I was working in his gym for him, coaching people. Wow. And that's how the coaching started. By which time Michael's round about 3 to 4. And he's showing me all these different things he did as a very young child in athletic development without being coached anything. Just jumping and leaping around. And he liked this thing called monkey magic. Oh. And, he used to do all these karate movements and taekwondo.
This is Mike, right?
Yeah, Michael, my oldest son, yeah. And it was fascinating to watch him, and what he was able to do, amazed me. So I was getting into training on a much higher level by the time that he started developing through up to like 6 years old. And he was doing chin-ups and all sorts, press-ups, all sorts.
So was Mike unique then, maybe? Was he an average kid, do you think, or did he have some special talent in fitness?
I don't think he was unique at the time. Okay, it was a mystery to me because I'd never had a kid before.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, wow, I've got this. I never expected to have kids until I was 40, and there he is. And he's doing these amazing things that I could never have done when I was his age, So I took a great interest in it, and I give him a few little exercises to help him develop. And many, many years ago, I run a competition called Strongest Man in Tameside. I knew quite a lot of people because, like I say, I got on with people, and there was plenty of people to talk to about training and stuff like that. Yeah. And we ended up running the Strongest Man in Tameside. Now, I didn't do it like Jeff Capes and the Strongest Man in the World and all that sort of different types of exercises, so everybody could join.
Yeah, participation.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the exercises was just sit-ups for under 12s, and Michael was about 6 then. And what happened, he beat everybody else.
Wow.
Even though they were 12, he was 6. Some of them, there was across the range, you see. And I thought, wow, that's fantastic, So then I started developing other things with him, strength training, and because I was always cautious at first with children. But then you realise over a period of time how much children can adapt to lightweight training done in the right manner. And it ends up then that Michael is doing quite well athletically in the schools.
Yeah.
And he's got lots of friends. So his friends wanted to come and train with him. And I'd opened this gym. So they all came to the gym. But by then as well, I'd started to have more children. And I ended up with 5 altogether. And the same happened for all of them. They developed early through training.
Yeah.
And they brought their friends. And when they brought their friends, we took success into the schools, if you like. So the school invited me into the school to teach the kids. So I started doing that. And then the school that Michael and Mark went to, they asked me to go into the school, and because they was doing really well, and other schools wanted me to go in. After that, it spread from Tameside into Manchester schools. Right, so I led a program in the Manchester schools with athletics, shot put, javelin, discus, sprints, weightlifting, football, basketball, even mentally and physically handicapped. I was coaching. And it really took off, and my gym took off, and the kids were always around, all their mates there. So it was a real family atmosphere, the gym was family,
And I made the mistake in the beginning of saying strength and conditioning, right? And it just sort of comes to me because I guess I'm, for want of a better word, conditioned into listening to that way of approach. But that's not what you do. I just wanted to be clear. You're more into the building of strength. So the conditioning, if you could just explain to us how you see the difference between the strength and conditioning that we see all the time now and hear all the time, as opposed to your approach.
Well, people look at strength and they imagine it's muscles working and you need to get them strong, you need to get them bigger and all this. But because I always had an interest in power, and I knew that power for the human body came from the brain, I didn't look at it from muscles having power, muscles having strength. I looked at it from the point of view as the brain is the thing. It's the emotion, it's the want, it's the need, desire that actually gets people stronger, faster, more powerful, more able, more endurance capacity. It's not from the muscles. Of course, that's where we see it, and that's what's used. But it's the brain that's creative in the fact that it's doing this work, memorizing all the things that it's doing, and then increasing on them things. And that's what really, to me, leads to growth.
Okay, and that's an important difference, and I just wanted to make sure that our listeners or viewers got that,
Yeah.
So now, if I can just take you a step back again, you finished you established, I suppose, your your way of doing things in secondary schools and with your own kids, Mike and Mark and those. So then you ended up at Man United, yeah? Do you want to take us from that period, at that point there, how you ended up going to Man United, from the days of Brian Kidd and then back with Sir Alex Ferguson and so on, and take us through that period?
Okay, so all my success came through my children and their friends. And then I went into the schools, and then I started teaching at college as well. So Michael and Stephen were at Man United Football Club. But our Mark was a weightlifter. He'd been in the Worlds and the Europeans. Sean was coming up. He was a weightlifter, and locally and, nationally, he won British championships and stuff like that. Even my daughter did weightlifting. She was in competitions and everything, but she also did javelin, shot put and discus at schools and stuff like that. And everybody knew the Cleggs for having a gym and being powerful athletes, because it was never just about strength. This is the whole thing about strength is a part of athleticism, but it's a very minor part when you look at the whole. So that's when strength and conditioning, it doesn't go by with me, because that's what they're using nowadays, but I don't see it that way. What even they're trying to develop with that, you see. So I was working with loads of different athletes on loads of different levels, and you start to gauge what people are really capable of doing, even just by their personalities. You know that personality, if the right personality to really concentrate and work hard, that they can become far more powerful, far faster or more developed than somebody who's got a weak personality, who thinks, I want this, but they can't work hard enough to get it.
Right.
So there's a lot of psychology in the use of exercise and the use of looking at sports and what you have to do in them sports to become very good at it. And I was developing these things with the schools, with the colleges. But then I got a very important phone call. It was from Brian Kidd, who was in the European Cup final, scored, etc.
That's right. He was the assistant manager at the time, wasn't he?
He was, for Alex Ferguson at Manchester United. Well, the reason he got involved was because he'd been talking to my son Michael and Stephen, and they were not the best footballers, but they were very much top-edge athleticism who could play football. And when Brian was talking to Michael one day, Michael told Brian about plyometrics. So I said, I've heard of this, and I'm very interested in this. So I'd like your dad to think in terms of working for us, you know what I mean? And he said, I'll give him a ring anyway. So one day, Mike had not even told me at this time. I got this phone call from Brian Kidd, and he said, I've been talking to you, Michael, and I know you do plyometrics. I'm very, very interested in this. And he said, I'd like you to come into the club and teach plyometrics to our players. And it was like, wow. I've been through the school, young school, college, all the rest of it. And now I've got an opportunity of going into a football club, you know what I mean? And I said, right. I said, yeah, I love plyometrics because it's a good part of the overall power. It's actually power training. When you look at it, it's pure power training. And he said to me, yeah, I'd like you to come in and just show me the types of things you do, and then we want to show the players how to do it. What an opportunity. So I said, well, who would we be working with, the schoolboys or the youth team? Oh, no, first team. I said, what? He said, I want you to come in and work with the first team. Don't worry about it. I know they're all superstars and everything. He said, but I'd like you to work with the first team. Is that all right? I said, well, not with plyometrics. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, your first team, Pallister, Bruce, Schmeichel, Robson, all these people are all players. You can't start doing plyometrics at their ages, who are fantastic athletes who can play football, because that's what it's about, playing football. The athleticism is towards playing football. You start doing something like plyometrics, which is for young kids to develop first of all, and then bring through as they grow. But you put it to older people, and they will definitely have injuries. He said, oh, you don't have to worry about that. I'm in charge of it. He said, we'll make sure it's nice and easy and everything. And I said, Brian, there's no way that I would teach plyometrics to people beyond like 28 years old, top of the level, because it's so easy to damage. I mean, I've been coaching kids from, Michael's age all the way through, and kids are very strong, they're very powerful, but they're also delicate in a lot of ways as well, especially in the way that you move, So after a long conversation, he put the phone down on me, which was very sad. But I stand by the principles of what I do. And I could see an injury. And I don't think I'd be anything as a coach if I took my coaching capabilities and ideas and somebody at the top end got...
Yeah, misuse them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was very upset, but I just accepted it. And then a bit of time went by, and it was very...
How long was that? About 5-6 years, was it?
No, not that long. Oh, no. It was probably about 18 months later. Brian Kidd became the manager.
He left
of
Blackburn, wasn't it? Right, yeah.
And he took Dave Fever, who's a great guy, really good physio. But he had a younger guy, Rob Swire, and Rob was so interested in everything. Now, they'd obviously discussed this at United. You know, Brian had obviously discussed it with Rob and Dave and all the rest of it, and he'd been in touch. When they moved on, Rob came to see me and said, look, we are really interested at United in what you do, because we've watched your sons play. Yeah. And we want to start using some of your principles. You know, I was doing a lot of boxing sort of stuff, you know, because I had a boxing club at Olympic, you see. And these things were going really well. But I was an athletics coach as well, so I was doing shot put, javelin, discus, which is all about power, and then speed. You know, we're doing sprints and hurdles, as well as weightlifting, as well as boxing, basketball. So I was doing so many different sports, and he said, we'd like to see what you would do for the footballers. So he brought me in, and I did about 3 months, and it was a fantastic time, you know, where we're developing all these different ideas, and, you know, double-footed bounds into punching, you know, boxing, and then, you know, lifting weights and sprinting and jumping up and heading balls and everything. So it was multitasking, if you like, different types of sport all spliced together. Right. And it's really interesting. It's dead exciting, you know. It's like seeing it, what the players get from it. And then one day he said to me, right, I've got a special job for you next week. I said, what's that? He said, I'm working with Roy Keane at the moment. He's had this leg problem, you know, this knee problem. Yeah. And I want you to help in some of the exercises. I've seen you doing it with the lads, and I know that's what we need. I'd like you to actually do the coaching, because I'm a physio, and he's a very, very good physio. He said, but I think you know these exercises better than me, and I'd rather you do that. So would you come in? I said, yeah.
That was absolutely a transition then for you, wasn't it? You were
massive
going
transition,
to work with the established players now.
So what happened, he invited me this day, and I got there, and Roy had all warmed up and everything. He says, right, so we're going to do some exercising now. You know, how do you think we should start? And I looked at Roy, and I said, just sup tea? He said, what? I said, do you drink tea? He said, yeah, of course I drink tea. I said, well, I think the best way, Robbie, if you don't mind, is me and Roy go and have a cup of tea, and then he can tell me about himself and what he's done and what he thinks his problems are, and then I can really understand what he's been through and etc. And
was
then
that sort of getting him relaxed in the zone, was it?
Yeah, well, yeah. But I wanted to know what he'd been through in the past with weights and stuff like that. Yeah. You know, because people have a profile, I can bench this and do so many chin-ups, I can deadlift that, you know, all that sort of stuff, you know, my bicep curls, you know, I can do with a 20-kilo dumbbell, whatever. Yeah. You know, and I just wanted to know what he'd done, so that you're always thinking about that, what they've done in the past if they're going to start doing weights. And he said, I'd never done weights. But I did do, I did boxing, because I know Michael's good at boxing. Yeah. So I said, oh yeah, you know, I use boxing as part of football training. You know, it's specific to football what we do. It's not getting in a ring and having a flaming bout, you know what I mean? But it's very specific for football, and it's very good. You know, it's a really good way of training to get certain forces.
Okay, but reflexes, I'm sure it helps that
speed,
too.
reaction, power, you know, but also it's the mental thing, because I'm a horrible little man. So when I'm coaching somebody with focus mitts and everything, I taunt people, and then they want to punch my head.
I know.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, I use all these things, psychology, you know, to try and get the best out of it, and then you can really see them move. And he loved it, you know. We went downstairs and he loved it when we did that type of training. And then he started telling the other players. Okay. And I'd started working with him at the beginning of the close season, you know, when all the football had finished. I started working there. So we worked up for 6 weeks before all the players came back.
Really?
And so there's other players who was injured, like Wes Brown. And I remember Phil Neville used to come in, and Gary Neville, and you know, Ben Thornley, you know, who'd had really bad problems in the past. Yeah. And I just got to know them all. So
really, they came to you. That's the point.
Yeah,
isn't
well,
it?
that's
You
it.
didn't
What
sort of-
happened
yeah.
is Roy was going in the changing room and said, "Oh, I've just done this, and I think it's really good, and you know, he fancy doing that,
Yeah.
you know." So when it turned out the whole team came back, Roy had been talking to everybody, and so had Wes Brown, and everybody was interested in seeing what I did, and I, you know, I saw this face up in the physio room, you know, looking down at me, and that guy's looking at me, and I'm doing all this work. I didn't know who he was, to be honest with you. And he certainly didn't know who I was. Who's this going in, doing all this stuff with my players? So he come down and he introduced himself, and it was Steve McLaren.
Oh, okay.
And
he
he
was
said, "I've
back
been
there again at Old Trafford, isn't he, Steve McLaren?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So this was back in 2000.
Yeah.
And he said to me, "I've heard a lot about you." And he said, "I've been watching you, and I'm really impressed and interested in
Now,
your
he was
training."
Sir Alex Ferguson's assistant manager.
He was
wasn't
the assistant, because Brian Kidd had gone and he'd taken
That's
over.
right, yeah.
And they'd done really well, of course. They'd won the treble, etc. And he was they're all looking for new ideas. Managers, coaches, they're all looking for. If they're any good, they're looking for new ideas, even if they've won.
Yeah.
You know. So he said to me that one of the most important things that happened to me was this. I went to his office, and he had this nice big seat, a bit like yours. You know, you obviously go for the nice big seats, don't you? You know, with all the backboards and everything for his training plans. You see. He said, "Right," he said, "I've got this calendar. And I've got to fill it with all the training from now, which is July, beginning of July, right the way through until August, first day of the season. Now, I want you to write in there all the training that you do with my lads."
Oh.
I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, so what would you do?" I said, "I'd wait for you." He said, "What do you mean, wait for me?" "Well, you need to put in the football first. Because the most important thing about football is playing football. Yes, it's good to be a coach in what I do, but we only supplement and complement what you do. So if you show me the sessions that you're going to do, then I can easily then start putting in whether speed or a change of direction, you know, strength, whatever, power, all these things. But you have to think in terms of football first, and then all these other things." And he said, "Wow." He says, "I've never heard that before." He said, "I've had loads of people telling me how I should train, should be doing this and that and the other, and they had no thought at all about the football."
The whole point of it, football.
Exactly. He said, "I really like that." So we worked together and we filled in his blocks, and then I took the lads, you know, when they done the football, even sometimes before they played football, and we did all the training. And another major thing happened to me, because obviously I was new there, and, you know, the likes of Tony Colton and Mickey Phelan there, and people like Brian
Because Mickey
McClare.
was the assistant manager for Alex as well, wasn't
Yeah,
he?
it was later on, yeah. And Jim Ryan was another one who was there at the time. And they said to me, "Right, you know, you've been working with these players, and we want to know from you, who's the fittest player?" I said, "Well, fitness is across the range. You know, well, you know, take across the range. Tell us who's the fittest player in our squad." I said, "Well, that's dead simple. That.
Not somebody I'd have guessed either.
Yeah. And I said, Teddy Sheringham. Yeah. I said, "What? Teddy Sheringham? He's an old man." I said, "Well, it doesn't bother me what age he is. I think he's the fittest across the board, without a doubt." Yeah. And they all laughed at me. Said, "Probably won't even be here still in a few months' time." So, well, you know, you're the football people. I only know what I see.
Yeah.
Guess what happened that year?
Treble.
No, it weren't the treble season. He won the European Player of the Year.
Indeed he did, yeah.
Now, that was something very specific.
Yes, that wasn't expected.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember that.
And when I'd said that, and they laughed at me, and then later on this happened, you know, then I got some credibility. And when you've got credibility with people, especially people who've laughed at you, you know, then they take notice. I mean, they did take notice anyway. All of them people. You know, got involved in what was doing in the gym. But obviously they were cautious because it'd never been done before like this.
Yeah.
And I got on with the players really well. Everybody could see that. I was making good partnerships and friendships.
Well, we can
with
see
players.
that from all the shirts and all the times they've come back to see you and what they write about you in your book. You know, it's quite amazing. Now, I've got a few angles I want to go at, but one I just want to bring you back to is this idea of plyometrics, you know?
Yeah.
I hadn't heard of that. I don't know what it is. Maybe if you can just explain real briefly what plyometrics is and your philosophy.
Well, I would have to show you body parts. Is that all right?
Depends what they are.
Well, let's have a look at the foot.
Right.
And mine's quite a good example,
Right.
actually.
I
See that thing there?
Yeah.
That arch there?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so when you step onto that, what
Yeah.
happens to that arch is it flexes.
Right.
Okay. And then as you move off, what happens? That comes back in place again.
Right.
So it flexes it, and it's like a spring.
Okay.
So you've heard of having a spring in your foot, haven't you?
In your step, yeah.
So if you press, you energize it through the flexion that's in the muscles, tendons, and ligaments.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the best way of seeing it and explaining it to kids especially.
Right.
So that straightens and it flexes out.
Right.
So that's the plyometric effect. But it doesn't just work there. It works right throughout the leg, into the hips, and even into the back.
Yeah.
So if you can harness all that flexation, if you will, for a better word.
Flexibility.
If you can harness it all through doing exercise on a regular basis, because remember, power comes from the brain, not from the body.
Right.
The brain has got to tell that body how to get that intense amount of energy from it without using muscle energy.
Right.
It's giving you energy that you're not having to supply with muscle energy.
Right.
So it's more rapid. It's a very short burst of power that you're going to get from it. And we started to do loads of jumping exercises. Running itself is actually plyometrics.
Yeah.
Because as you hit the floor,
You're bounced off again, sure.
Exactly.
Okay.
But if you learn to harness it, you can be using that, changing direction for jumping high, for running, and deceleration as well. Because that flexion as well, when you're decelerating, helps you to slow down.
Right.
So using them exercises that I developed myself through different sports, because that's a great thing about doing shot, javelin, discus. That's completely different than
absolutely, yeah.
So sprinting and
so
hurdles.
that's what got me. I mean, you mentioned the fact that it's very important in order to use that technique that you get the young athletes as young as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
And the reason for that, I'm guessing, I could be wrong, but the reason for that is the power of the brain.
Exactly.
It's getting them focused, getting them conditioned, if you like, for want of a better word up here, so that they're able to better focus the power from here to maximize the flexibility that technique gives you, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
So that kind of brings me to the next thing that I'm interested in, is how you got so interested in the power of the brain and the neuro tracking that you're interested in and the neurology behind it all. Can you just tell us, because there's a very interesting story about that, about a certain footballer from PSV. He was not Dutch, maybe it was Dutch, and how you were intrigued by this guy and how he was able to almost condition his mind that he was able to, score pretty much impossible goals sometimes from inside that box. Yeah.
So Ruud van Nistelrooy, he was one of the characters of the time I was at United in 2000 and odd, whatever it was, over them years. And he came in and we got on really, really well. He loved being in the gym. He loved training. He spent a lot of time in the gym when he was doing his rehab. He'd finally got through most of his rehab by the time he got to United. And then I was allowed to work with him and
it was
see
knee injury, wasn't it?
Yeah. ACL, I think it was, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And he had a stack of books with everything written in that he did,
Really?
Yeah, I didn't read it all, but it was there, And he said to me, they were really, really efficient in writing every single thing down. And but the only problem with that is it can be very boring. My type of training isn't exacting as that, and never has been, because it's more about getting involved with the mind and the use of the mind and stirring emotions like boxing and stuff like that.
Yep.
So we talked about loads of different types of training, and I start to watch him play, and especially studied the goals that he scored. Now, if you think about scoring goals, it's always the most important thing to do, because it's the most important thing to do in football, because it's how you win.
That's the whole point of it.
Exactly. It's the whole point. So you see the main thing being done by a certain person in a very specific way. It really makes you think, well, what's going on here? and are very interested in the way the brain works. And so I said to him, well, what's happening? You're in the 18-yard box there, and then the ball comes to you. What happens from there on?
Of course, it's a very crowded area on the pitch. Sometimes everyone's there, isn't it?
Exactly. Goalkeeper, 2 full-backs, 2 centre-backs, midfield players, your players, their players, the referee, and all the rest of it.
All but the goalkeeper from the other side.
The most pressurised area. All them people around you. And then you've got to focus attention to be able to get through whatever obstacles there are to get that ball into the specific part. Yeah, exactly. So I said, what happens? He said, oh, that's simple. He said, I just fall asleep. I said, what? He said, well, I can't remember it. He said, I don't know what happens. I said, really? He said, yeah, it's like I've just gone to sleep. And then I wake up again, and the ball's either in the back of the net, Rose head, somebody's tackle, whatever, but I can't remember what happened. And it's really weird. So then, when they scored the goal, I'm running back, having scored the goal, and thinking, wow, what happened there? He said, but later on at night, when I fall asleep, I have a dream. And it's about what happened.
It comes back in the subconscious.
It comes back, exactly. Which was amazing to me. I'd never heard this concept before, you know what I mean? He said, so I can see it, but obviously, he says, after the game, I'll see it being played and played and played on TV. So I know what I did, but I don't remember what I did. Mm-hmm. So what happens at night is it comes back, me actually being there doing it, not me seeing myself doing it. Mm. And it's a completely different concept. But it helped me a lot from years, from knowing and understanding this. Mm. And I said, well, how do you, what specific training? Because I'm really interested in what specific training do you do, to get that? He said, well, one of the main areas that I use is what's called boxes. Now, that's where you get, say, 8 players in a circle. It's called boxes, but it's in a circle, which is always found strange with a round ball as well. Right. So you got all these people in a circle knocking the ball to each other. But you have 2 people who run around trying to stop it.
Right.
And he said to me, that's where I get my best opportunities to be looking at, making sure when somebody's coming at me that I've picked out somebody to knock the ball to, because I don't like going in the centre. He said, I never like going in the centre. In fact, he said, since I've been at United, I've never been in the centre. Now, as it happened, I'm talking to him, Gary Neville's there. And Gary says, oh, what are you on about you? He said, you're always in the centre. He said, Gary, I never am. Oh, you are. He says, I'm not. So they had an argument. I said, whoa. Let's stop the argument. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll come out tomorrow morning, see your boxer, because he did it every day. Even the gaffer used to get involved sometimes, and Roy Keane once or twice told him, op it, because he wasn't good enough, you know what I mean? So that was really interesting.
Yeah, he did like to get involved.
So anyway, you can imagine, I go out this morning, I'm usually in the gym all the time, and I'm having all sorts of insults thrown at me, go, what are you doing here, what are you looking at? But everybody knew what was going to happen. Yeah. So they usually play it from 8 to 10 minutes. But you're talking now, we're on 15 to 18 minutes, and they're still at it. And there's something I'm seeing. What do you think it is? It's Ruud van Nistelrooy still on the outside. He's never gone on the inside.
He wasn't ever brought in.
Exactly. And to me, over the years, with all these players that you can see on these pictures, is they tell me stories. And then I look to see if they're actually true. Mm. And the really top stars would never say that they've done something that they haven't. Because they don't need to. Because they can always brag about things that they've done. Because they wouldn't be top if they didn't have bragging material. And he'd said that, and then he proved it. Mm-hmm. So from then, I started really looking into what he was doing, how he was training, all the rest of it, to then gain a real interest and amount of ability to be able to pass that on to kids. Because really, I'm just a dad. Yeah. I'm a dad who's had kids, and then their friends come, and it's like your dad to other kids, and I just work through. And what I want to do is extract from the best to give to the rest. Yeah. That's all my job was. Yeah. I was never a clever guy, you know what I mean? It was just taking things off other people,
Absolutely.
and then giving it to other people for their opportunities to do well. Yeah. And I'm dead happy because our family's done quite well through, athleticism and gyms and stuff like that. And we've been in the industry for a long time. So that's one of the really major parts of working with a top line athlete, which really got me going to really understand them. And by having one-to-one time where you're not just working, you're talking, you're listening, and I can watch what they do out on the field after they've been in the gym or out on the pitch. It was just amazing. Yeah. You know, that was my university, if you like. They were my, you know, all them players there, they were my...
Research.
Yeah, exactly.
So, just wanted to circle back, you know, to your technique and the fact that you're focusing on the individual, I suppose we could say. You're looking at the power of the mind and how it's focused, and everyone is different and how they and equally everybody is different in how they train, how they play football, how they run, how they jump. So what for you, and I know we you know, you coach from very young all the way to the highest level professionals, but your approach to get the best out of them is one-to-one. Is that what I'm picking up, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so then really, do you tailor each individual approach for each individual athlete?
Not specifically at the moment, in where we are at the moment, because a lot of this is research. You know, I know what works, so we can put what works in, but then we got to look at each individual. But they have to be tested, because if you're going to spend time on people, they've got to be worth spending time on. So if I teach somebody a technique and they don't pick it up, well, it's pointless testing them over it. Absolutely pointless, because there'll always be a bad test. So I've got to say to parents, they want their kids to come in, they want to do the testing, they want to do this work, but they have to be at a level that they can come in and work. Now people say, well, what age is it, you know, that they can come in here? I say, it's very simple. The age when they can do their shoelaces up. Because I can't be working with kids who can't do the shoelaces up and have to stop it all the time to have them done for them. So the first thing is, are they intelligent enough to do the shoelaces? So if they are, then make sure they can keep them shoelaces done. So they come in here and then I'll give them 5 things to do. You know, teach them 5 things, dead simple. And then they go away. And when they come back, the first thing I do, can you do them 5 things? And guess what? Very few of them can. 5 things, so they have to do, they can't do it. So the process comes from a conversation that I had with Alex Ferguson many, many years ago. He said, the way you run your gym, you know, you're at people, you should tell people, you won't give, you know, and that's a way of doing it. He said, but I'll tell you a way that I do things. I'm not saying that you're wrong in what you're doing, but I'll just tell you a way that I do things. When somebody new comes in, no matter what they cost, who they are, I say to them, do this. And when I say to them, do this, I then watch to see what happens. Now, if when I say, do this, they go and do this.
I've heard that before.
So, then I say, right, you've done this, now do that. And then I watch to see if they do that. And if they do that, great. Then I say, do the other. And then I watch to see if they do that. Now, if they do this when I say do this, and that when I say do that, and do the other when I say do the other, you know they're listening and it's worthwhile teaching them, right? But if somebody comes in and I say do this and they don't do it, I never ask them to do anything after that because it's a waste of time. And he said, what you're doing is spending a lot of energy on these people, telling them to do things time and time again, and they're not listening. And they're a waste of time. And that's stuck in my mind. Now, in a professional football club, you're paid for everybody who comes in to make sure that they get the best of what you've got. And so I always tried to do that. Yeah. But when it finished the professional football club, and I started on my own, which I'd done previously anyway because of the Olympic gym, 40 years it's been now. But what I did is use some of the principles that I learned from all these, but also especially from that old Scotsman, because he was a very, very clever guy.
He was a great psychologist, wasn't he?
He was. Yeah. He was the psychologist of the club. So what I do now is I'll ask the kids to come in, I'll give them this to do, that to do, and the other do. And then I'll say, this is what you've got to do next time. And when they come back in, what do we do now? Well, I told you what to do. And they don't know what to do. And what happens is, bit by bit, I don't go off 3 times if you don't do it in 3 times, because the kids have got to learn. Yeah. But very quickly, the ones that can't learn, they shouldn't be here. Because my personality now, especially as I'm getting older, can't cope with having to try to teach somebody when he can't be taught.
Yeah.
And so it's time for them to leave.
Yeah.
But the other thing is then you've more time to spend on those who have listened, who have learnt, and are ready for the next stage.
Yeah.
Now, we're in football, so it's all about competition. They have to have a competition mentality. So everything that I do has competition element around it. Like, that's why I have the targets to shoot the ball into, so they can compete. We have lights there to compete the sprints, accelerometry, so that somebody jumps this high, somebody jumps higher. There's winners and losers. We've got the D2 over there, somebody gets 65 on it, somebody gets 75 on it. It's all about winning and losing. Because very often it's the losing that makes or forces the athlete to make more concentrated effort and get better. But the thing is, over years, I found out who the greatest competitors were and how they become the best competitors. And it's quite startling. But I had this young guy come in to the gym when I was at United, and he said, right, I know who you are, and I know that you've been training Ryan Giggs. And he's the best player that I've seen.
So we're talking about a youngster.
A youngster, 18 years old.
Who wasn't even British.
No.
Who was Portuguese.
Yeah.
Whose English probably would have been passable, but probably about all.
Not too bad.
Wasn't too bad, right?
Wasn't too bad at all.
But yet, a youngster coming into the first team, obviously talented.
Yeah. Could speak 3 languages.
Knew about, so he knew about you. This is quite extraordinary to start
Yeah,
with.
exactly. So it did take me aback. And he said, I want to work harder than Ryan Giggs, more often, and I'm going to be better. I said, wow, that's some claim. I said, what will be interesting for me is to see if you can do all the things that's got him to where he is, and see if you're able to do more than he's done to get better than he was. Well, I'll prove to you. And it became...
so you gave him this challenge?
Yeah. The challenge was there. He didn't need me to give him the challenge because he was challenging himself all the time, or else he wouldn't have said what he did. But then, you see, as a coach, you've got to watch to see if they do it. And what I was watching, a man who perfected recognition of what's needed and then going getting it. So if he needed to be faster, he'll be looking at all the things that will make him faster. If he needed to be stronger, all the things that made him stronger. If he needed to jump higher, we all go on about it jumping high and it looks like he's flying. He knew by listening to people, talking to people, working with people, how to get the best out of himself. And he's the one that came along and split everything into small segments and worked on every single one as often as he could to perfect his...
technique, I suppose, isn't it?
His body. I've just been shown a sign there. And I would imagine everybody can tell me who the player is.
I don't think it'd take much to guess.
No. So this is Mr. Ronaldo, Cristiano Ronaldo. And it was such a joy because it was in 2003 that he came, if I remember rightly. But my brain's going a bit, could be wrong there. But it's round about that time. Yeah, it was 2003. And he walked in and he talked the game. He talked the work. He talked as he was going to perform, and then I watched him do it. And that's the amazing thing.
So he was confident too.
Confident, absolute confident, because he knew he was going to do everything that he needed to do. He told me what he'd done in the past to get as good as he was. But now he needs the tools to get him better than anybody's ever been. And so he looked at his diet, he looked at his sleep, he looked at his, recuperation, he looked at his training in different ways, in the skills, in the, understanding football itself. I had some great conversations with Carlos Queiroz about football and how to play it and stuff like that. Rennie Mullenstein, I know he spent a lot of time with him. And he was coming to me to look at what I did and how I do it, and he
was
knew
prepared
about my lads and
to
everything.
learn from
So
whatever he needed to.
So I've watched over the years these people who are called geniuses. And how many there are, I don't know, but I've watched a good few. This guy's a genius. Now, they talk about Elon Musk, and it's only recently that I've realised this, because I haven't studied outside, athleticism, really. But they go on about Elon Musk, how he compartmentalises all the different things to do in different blocks, and make sure he doesn't spend too much time, but spends enough time. And then he can get across a massive area or work range to complete the things that he needs to do. That's what he was doing then, when he was 18 years old. And he'd have been doing that for a while, recognising what he needed to do and then working on it. And it was fantastic to see. At times, at United in the early days, there was thoughts that he wouldn't even make it. But they just didn't, the people who were saying that didn't realise what he was doing. It was an apprenticeship at Manchester United. To go and play at Real Madrid, that's where he really wanted to be. He was there 5.5 years. And during that time, he made sure he was doing everything possible for him to be the greatest player, not just play for Man United. And that's what most people do, who go to Man United, and I want to play for Man United. But he came in a different way, which helped me to learn. When you learn what these people are capable of, then as other people come, you can give advice that's relevant. I see a lot of advice given in the sports field that is absolutely ridiculous. The types of exercises that are done, the way it's done, it's mind-boggling how easy it is to destroy an athlete if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, and they're taking them down the wrong path as well, perhaps, when they could be doing something different. But Ronaldo, the story as I remember it, Ronaldo was playing for Sporting Lisbon. They played Man United in one of the European Champions League matches, and he absolutely destroyed us down the right wing. And the players went to Sir Alex afterwards and pleaded, "You've got to get this guy."
Well, I don't think it was in the European Cup. I think it was actually a match at that brand new ground, and it was a what's it match? Exhibition match.
Exhibition match.
Because we'd been on tour to America.
Oh, okay.
And we came back.
It wasn't a match against the team.
Yeah, the team that he was playing. He was absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, he just completely destroyed the entire. Yeah. So there was a time.
So I was there at that match.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
So you saw him for the first time as an unknown kid. Yeah.
Well, then I'm sat there in my chair, and he walks in, and then he starts to speak. Very good English, by the way, probably better than mine. But I only know 2 languages, English and bad language.
I know.
So
it's mostly bad language when I'm talking to you, but no, I'm joking.
He's a very well-educated lad.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to. I've heard stories about when I was talking to the CEO of Man United when he was trying to explain the importance of the whole approach of the club. It's not just your wages. That's what you do. Your wages comes from the sponsors. It comes from the fans. It comes from lots of places. Yeah. So you do really have to understand that you do have to put yourself out from time to time. And he said to me that of all the people he spoke to on a one-to-one, on a Zoom, because it was during the COVID time, some of them were lying on their bed looking up at the ceiling. Some of them were on their phone when he was trying to talk to them. Some of them were distracted by other things. Only one person gave him his undivided attention for whatever it was, 20 or 30 minutes, and that was Cristiano Ronaldo.
Oh, that doesn't
Everything was
surprise me.
put away, every phone was put away, 100% concentration,
I can imagine that being true.
Yeah, so that was quite an extraordinary, for me anyway, it wasn't just the football, it was the commercial that he was interested into. Every aspect of him as a person, as a player,
So from that, I feel that I was given a gift to watch a genius develop. Now, if I can't learn from that, then there's something wrong with me. And so I've come to conclusions as I'm watching the world of sport and training for sport. There's a lot of futile types of exercises that are done that don't do them any good at all.
Yeah.
It's false exercise. And there's a lot of lads who get really bad injuries and have to pack in football because of these injuries. That should never happen.
Yeah.
Because they've not thought it through.
Yeah.
Exactly how it should be done.
Players do not need to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
No, absolutely
they're not. That's not the game. That's not what they need to do. Just to go back to geniuses again, I believe Paul Scholes was another genius of a different type.
Well, a very different type. Paul Scholes, to me, and I told him this, so he's a non-athlete. He was not very strong. He was not very fast. He was not very. He had no endurance capacity. He had asthma and stuff like that.
That's right, yeah.
And so he had all these problems. So how does he become as good as he was? Well, he was the most fantastic athlete within a 3-meter space. And the movement that he could do in a 3-meter space, which is similar to what I'm working on now, the cube, it's actually 4 meters, that. But he was so quick at being able to see, remember, and get from one place to another in a very small area. I've never seen anybody like him.
And players couldn't get near him.
Exactly. That was the thing. He did some terrible things, like, we know, tackles and stuff like that.
But that wasn't his skill.
No. Well, that's what he wanted to do anyway, because he got booted a lot. So at times he'll get his own back, which unfortunately is part of sport.
Yeah, he had that.
But the way he was able to manipulate his body and to be able to play like he did was just way ahead of anybody else in the same area that I'd ever seen. So again, I get all these insights from these different players. Ole Gunnar telling me how he's going to put the ball through a goalkeeper's legs, in the next game. How does that come about? But he did, you know what I mean? So I'm very fortunate, and I believe I've been given knowledge that's worthwhile sharing with the rest of the world, whoever wants to know it. The thing is, I don't believe in the strength and conditioning or the sports science model, unfortunately, because I was around when they brought in the model for strength and conditioning. This is the reason why it turns my lips when I think strength and conditioning. A guy called Mike Stone, brilliant guy, but he was involved in strength and conditioning for American football. American football. So when I started to listen to what they were doing and why, I went on a course with him, and he turns up with his big weightlifting belt because he needed to be strong and he had to make sure his back didn't get hurting and all this, years of experience, this, that, and the other. I started to recognise that a lot of what he was saying was not football related, and I'm thinking, well, you're telling us what to do for football, but you're in American football, and it doesn't relate.
Yeah.
Now let's have a look at the model, American football. Well, the first thing you've got to look at in American football, they don't use the ball. It's an odd-shaped object.
Yeah.
So in American football, they don't use a football.
No.
Okay? So that's the first thing. Now, the other thing is, do you know when they kick in American football? It's that time when there's a break and they get a loud hail and say, will that guy who knows how to kick a ball come out, please, because we're stuck here at the moment. And so you see this guy run on, don't you, with his little bag and all his tools. Yeah. And he sets this little mound up and all that. Yeah. And he kicks this object.
And then he goes back again.
And then he goes back again. He disappears. And I think, where's he gone? But we play football. But not in America. We're soccer players. Soccer. Soccer. Yeah. We're not footballers over here. 11 people getting a ball and kicking it about and heading it and smashing it in the goal.
We're soccer.
They call theirs football, but it isn't. Yeah. So the model's wrong. Yeah. Now, when you look at powerlifting, which is American as well, powerlifting is deadlift, bench press, and squat. Yeah. They're not power exercises. They're strength exercises. Yeah. Yeah. Olympic lifting is power exercise, but they call it powerlifting. So if you go off their models for sport,
it confuses the thing, doesn't it?
Confusing and wrong. And their methodology has gone into our football, our sports scientists and our strength and conditioning guys are led by the American model. Well, we play football.
It's not fit for purpose.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why I've studied it and what they do. And this lifting very, very heavy weights with young lads in academies and stuff like that and causing a lot of damage is futility and stupidity. And when I speak to sports scientists and something's not scientific unless, if you're going to do a sprint, it's between this distance and this distance. And all that matters is the speed you get between there and there, or how quickly you can. They're not thinking about it. The brain has to be working when you run there to get ready for the next stage. Yeah. They take that away. Yeah. So in other words, cut the head off and just let the body do the run. Yeah. Don't use the brain that has to be working as you're looking, examining the information that comes in as you're running for the ball.
And make the run when you need to.
Exactly.
And conserve energy so you're able to last 90 minutes at peak performance.
But also the main thing is being able to recognise what you've got to do whilst you're running when you've got the ball. Yeah. Well, you've not got the ball at the time that you're running the fastest.
Yeah.
You've got to be getting ready for the deceleration, composure, and skill. And
when-
that's not scientific. I've been told by so many sports scientists, that's not scientific what you're saying, because all our sprints are the starting point. You accelerate, then decelerate, then play the ball.
Yeah. So metrics basically that mean nothing in isolation.
It's all in isolation.
That's what it is. You know, a number in isolation means nothing.
No,
you know,
exactly.
You know, and then compared against another number, it means nothing. Is 10 miles per hour fast or slow, or what, relative to a snail, or relative to a Porsche?
Yeah.
You know, so it means nothing. So we might leave it there now, and I'm thinking what we'll do on the next session, Mick, is we'll circle back and look at how you've tried to harness the brain, and you just mentioned now, for example, bringing the mind more into the power.
Yeah.
Okay. And making it such that the brain is trained as much as the body.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Mick. Great
Good.
to see you
Well,
again.
it's great to see you again, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Absolutely, buddy.
Thank you very much. Told you we'll never get out with that again.